It's deliberately, it's people practicing oversensitivity in order to win a different political point.
That's the gaslighting that's going on, right?
I did a debate at the East London Mosque about 5 years ago, which is widely regarded as being fairly radical in the UK. And it was on this, and the entire audience were niqabis and were wearing burqas. Yep. And I made the point quite often. I just didn't know who was speaking, and I thought it was quite a relevant point because like I don't know where, who, we got somewhere. Yes, and I remember at one point one of the women pointed out that the reason why they did it is because there might be arousal in men, and the presenter very wisely said at one point, asked the important question, could a woman who wasn't wearing a burqa come to your house? And I would be able to take my burqa off. And they said, could Douglas come to your house? And I remember saying, I promise not to get aroused. And there was an audible inhalation of burqa. Anyhow,
very quickly to finish the point I was going to make.
An audible inhalation.
If Boris Johnson, the point I was going to simply say is, if Boris Johnson isn't safe from that mob, right? Yeah. And this is a man who held high office in the country. And if the police are looking into whether that they should criminally prosecute somebody that was the foreign secretary of the country, just imagine if the average person wants to have a conversation about whether actually they think it's important to see somebody's face.
But it's also just bullshit, isn't it? I mean, it's a false claim being made by people that this is such an outrageous thing to say. It's deliberately, it's people practicing oversensitivity in order to win a different political point.
That's the gaslighting that's going on,
It is constructed as a threat, and that is why it is important. It's not the content, it's not that it's true, it's that it will stick. And so I really want to get to the flip side of this, which is what do we do to break the back of this thing?
And by the way, Brett, let's just pause and let people know that you'll be able to ask questions in just a few minutes, all right? So we will be taking questions from the audience, so that I'll give you the final word on this particular session, Brett.
So what we're finding out, we're doing a note comparison up here, and we're finding out some important things. Typical to imagine, hey, if I'm barely able to say what needs to be said, what are people who are in a lesser position to say those same things facing when they do it? That there's this stigma that comes back. How do we engineer a reduction in the effectiveness of that stigma? Well, we also have another place where we can compare notes here. Everybody has seen Jordan Peterson having tripped over the idea of enforced monogamy with Nellie Bowles. But we have two other data points. Eric and I both talked to Nellie. She tried to get each of us to acknowledge that we were MRAs. I don't remember if I even knew what the term was, as Eric did not know, but the fact that she went through 3 members of the so-called IDW looking for somebody she could get to sign up for some position that would seem frightening, and finally landed on Jordan Peterson, who was maybe slightly less careful, tells you that this was not a journalist. This was somebody looking to establish a story that would stigmatize in this case, Jordan, the whole IDW. So you're getting a peek into what the mechanism is and how it functions. Now, how would you fight something like that? You would, A, take people who are in the strongest position to say difficult things, and they can provide cover for people who are in a slightly less strong position. So what you want is for safety to spread, because ultimately what breaks the back of this thing is numbers. It's large numbers of people saying, that's bullshit. Right? So if we can get there, it'll be a whole different landscape. Now, in terms of social media, we've got 2 things. We've got, or maybe it's 3. We've got the huge danger of getting sucked in, ruining your family vacation, losing your actual quality of life to this thing that can suck up all your time. You've got a very big liability in terms of social media being used. If somebody becomes truly dangerous to something powerful, then manipulating them through social media, in other words, creating phony outrage amongst a small number of accounts, can cause you to have your attention sucked into fighting something that isn't even real. But there is also a solution in social media to these problems. In other words, my experience of thinking I was safe enough to fight the phony equity coalition, discovering that in fact I wasn't anywhere near safe enough, absent the help of people who had a bigger following who could stamp out the fake narrative that I was a racist. So that kind of thing is the mechanism that we want to spread, which is to rescue honorable people from this phony outrage, from fake threats, stigma, all of these things, such that people in general can get back to a life where you are free to make a joke. And you are free to make a joke and discover, actually, that one's a little over the line. I regret it, but it's not like a revelation about some deep defect. So I would say, at some level, I think we're learning the rules of a brand new landscape, and those rules are bound to be more interesting than we think. But there's a lot to be worried about.
Jon Stewart used to say that when he would interview Hillary Clinton, after asking a question, you could see her brain buffering to try to figure out whether or not she was going to say something that could even remotely be interpreted as being as giving offense to anybody. And you're sort of terrifying me that maybe we're all going to become Hillary Clintons in that respect. Let's take some questions from the audience. If you do have a question, can you come up to the microphone? And just a reminder, if you keep it concise, everyone will love you, and if you ramble, everyone will hate you. And also, questions end in question marks. They're not biographies. Yes, go for it over here.
I organise an IDW meetup in Sydney, for anyone. And the next topic that we're going to be discussing is gender. And as part of that, one of the people said they're going to bring along a person who is an activist of the, LGBTQI, ABCD, whatever. And I made the very simple rule that if you want to come, you have to answer with arguments and not slurs. So is that a fair rule? And if yes or no, how do we stop becoming a kind of an echo chamber or strawman, the kind of identitarian arguments within this group of people?
Well, one request: can we bring up the house lights a little bit so we can see?
Do they want to say who the question's for, or is it just?
Yeah. Why don't you take your pick? Who would you like to answer it? Because all of them could.
Oh, okay. Whoever jumps in
Eeny,
first.
meeny, miny, moe.
Can I give one possibility? Because obviously this is a subject which is a more considerable landmine than many others as an issue. I think that one of the most important ground rules is this. You have to say, stop equating speech and violence. Stop saying, in all of this stuff, we need to find a way to think out loud. Okay, in a group like you're describing, or any other group, we have to find a way to think out loud and to try stuff out. Sometimes it will be wrong, often it'll be right, and so on, but we have to be able to have that ability. And one of the things that's stopping it is this endless equation of a thought that you've had and have voiced with the most extreme act of violence. So, for instance, if you say X, it's people like you that are the reason why so many of these people are killing themselves. You can't have any conversation if a part of the answer is being presented in that way. And I suppose just to see the people who are doing that as just using another tactic in order to win a particular sectional point. But allowing words to be words again is the beginning of some kind of solution.
Yeah, very quickly, there's something I said about that, because on the niqab debate, they were saying that Boris shouldn't have said what he said because it will encourage hate crime against Muslim women in niqabs. Now, I'm often repeat this mantra that I came up with, that no idea is above scrutiny and no person should be beneath dignity. And I'm all for protecting the dignity of the woman inside the veil while criticizing and even mocking the fact that she has to cover her face because somehow her beauty needs to be kept wrapped up like a sweet, which is the analogy often given in mosques. Now, if you follow this principle that you can't say something because it encourages hate crime against the person you're speaking about, you can't be critical of their ideas, you could apply it both ways. So I said that I put up a status, and it's like, if we can't speak about Muslim fundamentalism because it can be used, our critique of Muslim fundamentalism can be used to encourage hate crime against Muslims, then let's not also speak about anti-Muslim bigotry, because jihadists use that to recruit people to kill non-Muslims. It's a very real thing. Jihadists are killing non-Muslims, and they use Islamophobia I don't like that phrase. They use Islamophobia as an excuse to recruit people. So likewise, we shouldn't speak about discrimination against Muslims either, because we're encouraging hate crime. And so in the end, what we find is that we can't say anything. We want to just shut up and not speak.
Well, that's the aim.
Is indeed. So I've just got to say, don't allow for anyone to tell you that when discussing ideas, you shouldn't talk about them because what somebody else might do. Of course, everyone's individually responsible. We have to be responsible for how we speak about our own ideas, but not for how other people abuse what we're trying to say. And I'll shut up on this point, which is I'm a bit wary about using the phrase intellectual dark web to describe anything about ourselves. And I'm here because I like these guys. That's pretty much it.
But that's exactly the way they talk on the intellectual dark web.
If I could throw in something super quick.
Eric coined it. I think it's your fault.
Yeah, I'm up for you doing this IDW thing. The simple thing I would say is if you go to an amusement park, you might see a sign that says you have to be this healthy to be on this ride. And so fundamentally, if the issue is going to come out that it's a question of compassion, you have to say, look, you have to be healthy enough in order to come to this meetup in order that you can participate in a discussion. And our compassion for you suggests that if you're not that healthy, we would prefer that you not attend the meeting so that you can care for yourself and hopefully nurse yourself to a point where you can actually handle some ideas that could be precursor to something dangerous. There's no way to avoid having saltpeter in the world because it can be a precursor to black powder. So you're totally within your rights to do that and do it from a position of compassion.
I also just want to point out that we are having a harder time answering that question because of the destruction of the concept of safe space, which should mean a space in which it is safe to take the risks of speaking off the cuff and discovering that your idea isn't as good as you thought or something like that. So safe space has been co-opted to be a space that you are safe from the possibility of offense, which is a space in which you can make no useful progress. But it should be recaptured and turned into a space in which you can take risks, and it is safe enough for you to do that, and that's really, I think, what you're looking to create, and it's a good thing.
And if the question is about how to deal with someone who you're bringing in order to advocate on behalf of minority sexualities, then I think that comes also back to the point that's been made several times about it not necessarily being necessary to be a member of that minority in order to be able to speak cohesively about it or convincingly about it. 1/3 of this panel is gay, and Douglas, you and I would probably agree that you can be a charitable person towards gay people and you can be pro-gay rights without being gay, and the idea that you have to be gay in order to understand how to have compassion and understanding towards LGBT people is crazy. Next question.
Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you all for coming, seriously.
So I thought I'd give this opportunity to ask a question from a friend of mine who's overseas and obviously couldn't make it to here. He says, I'm a liberal secular, it's probably more for you, Maajid. I'm a liberal and secular guy born in Egypt but raised in the West. I'm always torn between returning to Egypt and helping to bring the political and cultural religious revolution that I want to live in, or staying in the West where I know I'll be happy and safe. What advice do you have for someone who desperately wants to fix the many problems in his country and make the world a better and more peaceful place, but isn't brave enough to go back there and do it himself? Is there anything I can do from a safe distance?
There's lots he can do. I wouldn't advise he go to Egypt. Clearly, I've been in jail in Egypt, and I wouldn't want him to suffer the same fate. Egypt, currently under Sisi, has regressed when it comes to human rights and clamping down on dissent. And they are worse than they were under Mubarak, who jailed us. So probably what he can do, is a serious need for, is stuff that's already being discussed in English by liberal reforming Muslims and ex-Muslims who are developing their own platforms, and there are conversations that are occurring across boundaries and countries. There's a desperate need for that to be translated into Arabic and disseminated online to the Arabic-speaking world. And that's where he could be of real use.
Thank you. Next question.
Yes, I wanted to ask Maajid, when it comes to coming up with liberal interpretations, either your work or Islamic scholars, do you find that you are able to believe the more liberal interpretation as sincerely as the more obvious literal one? And if not, are you ever sort of forced to, I don't want to say cynically, but sort of pretty up the clause, or do you just have to excise Allah's words altogether?
Well, I'm quite open about my lack of devotion to any religion, and so I don't necessarily have to refer to a book to tell me it's wrong to murder a baby or rape a child. I kind of know that from inside myself and my moral compass. What I try and do is defer in recognizing the pragmatic necessity for that kind of dialogue and discourse to happen in countries like Pakistan or Saudi Arabia, where if you take some of the stances I take, you're probably going to get killed before you finish your sentence. And so there is only, to my view, there's a pragmatic way forward, and that is to have that conversation within a certain discourse that is tolerated. You cannot remove the blasphemy law in Pakistan without having a religious conversation because it's justified using religion. And if you try and circumvent that, they will kill you. And even the governor of Punjab, which is the country's most populous province, wasn't safe from the assassin's bullet. His own bodyguard shot him 9 times and killed him. And I know the family, and the consequences of what happened next are just unimaginable for some of the suffering. So the authorities caught the murderer, and so the jihadists decided to kidnap his son after having murdered the father, and then said, if you don't release the murderer, we'll kill the son as well. So in a context like that, where the governor of the wealthiest and most strongest province wasn't safe from the assassin's bullet, the only way you can have that conversation in this current climate is to speak in a language and a discourse that is tolerated. I don't do that, but at Quilliam, we have theologians that do that. And so, of course, that brings me to the second part of your question, which is, do they believe in some of the liberal interpretations that they advocate? I think that we discussed this in our book. I think that more important than whether they do or not, because I don't know what's inside their hearts, more important is the promotion of multiple interpretations, including conservative interpretations. The nature of Islam, Sunni Islam in particular, is that there's no church, there's no hierarchy, there's no clergy in Sunni Islam, which is 80% of Islam in the world. And so if we can approach it in a way, forgive the phrase, death by 1,000 cuts, I'm not advocating killing religion, though I'm sure Sam would be happy with that.
I'm going to tweet about it.
But that's something to take out of context from me. But if you look at that phrase, death by 1,000 cuts, the idea is if we can promote a multiplicity of interpretations, that develops a form of theological pluralism. The only system that we've come up with as humanity that can cater for that is secularism. Because theocracy, by definition, wants to pick the correct interpretation and enforce it. Now, if you've got Sunni Islam doesn't have a clergy, that doesn't make sense. Because if you don't have a clergy, you will have multiple interpretations. And the only kind of system that can cater for that, as I say, is secularism. And I think that's what I'm advocating. It's a political argument for a tolerance of a multiplicity of interpretations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. A bit close there. A friend of mine who I guess you could consider to be slightly on the far left a little bit said to me before this conference, have fun at your alt-right conference. And I think there was, a little bit of joking there. But I guess the question is to anyone, but probably more to Eric. What can we do? I know conversation is something that is extremely important, and I think if people actually listen to what you guys were saying, they'd know that, that this is not an alt-right conference. I think there's a certain percentage of people that because of what they already think about your reputation and what they've heard, they're not really going to listen to the things that you guys are saying and some of us are saying. So the question, I guess, is, and I heard Eric sort of raise this topic in, I think it was a Dave Rubin talk, but the question is, what can we do, what can you guys do to actually show people, without them having to listen to you, but to actually do things to show them that not only when you're not alt-right, but you guys are the furthest thing from the alt-right. And I guess, and what can we do as well to be part of something, part of a movement that can, I guess, help people and do positive things in the world, just to show people where we're not that kind of people.
Eric, sorry to jump in, Eric.
Great question.
Eric, just sorry to jump in. We've got three 3 minutes, so apologies to all of you, the other people who are asking
No, I got
questions.
you.
Yep, you'll be able to ask your questions at the next session.
I tried, if you remember Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, they realize what they're going to need. They have a time machine. They put it back where they're going to need it, so they reach into the bushes and they get what they want. What I did before was I asked, how many of you are alt-right? And the audio is going to be released, right? And nobody said, I'm alt-right. Let me ask a question. How many of you are left of center? Woo! That was just me. Anybody else? Okay. The point is, we're going to start doing this with audio. We're going to start doing this with photographs. We're learning their game, and what we're going to do is we're going to start making them hate their own position, because they are going to look so stupid and so foolish. And you're correct. We haven't done enough for you. And so I want you, look, you guys are paying good money to be here. We're taking time to come all the way to Australia. Ask us these questions. What do you need to fight back? So I'm trying to do some audio for you so that in the future, you can point to this exact place and say, you're full of shit. There is just no truth in what you're saying. In our family, Brett and I don't think anybody in our family has voted right of center since the 1920s, right? This is the funniest thing ever. Allow it to be humorous and join us. Thanks.
I guess what I just add is there that I'd like to show people that we're making actually positive change in the world. What can we do to actually make positive change?
Well,
so
you heard me on Dave Rubin's show when I said, hey, maybe we should actually try to do the same de-inflection of third-person singular pronouns, which are the only pronouns inflected for gender in the English language, that we did to the honorific Miss versus Mrs., where females were inflected for marital status, men were not. We came up with Ms. So I said, hey, do you want to actually take this on? Do you want to start with intersex rather than trans, which is a clear biological case where people are neither physiologically male nor female, right? We are going to show more compassion. We are going to start this process of winning. And what we need to do for you, right, this is the advance guard. We're here to try to take the hill so that the rest of you guys can hold it, and then we can go on to the next one, right? And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build into we're gaining strategy to hold the hills, to make these ridiculous perspectives funny rather than terrifying. And thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Brett.
I want to jump in and say one more thing, which is that this is an excellent place to scrutinize how the magic trick is done, right? How is it that we are portrayed as right, far right, alt-right, whatever it is? The way it's done is by getting people who would conclude something different were they to listen, not to listen. That's the key. So there will be something, maybe it's Nellie Bowles who comes to the New York Times and broadcasts something that makes somebody unhearable to the point that you will decide it is sophisticated not to listen to them. So the way to break that, especially in the case of whoever it was who just asked that question, you have a friend who believes this, but they also know you and you're here. So effectively, you can say the equivalent of, well, I dare you to listen and see whether you retain that interpretation. You won't be able to if you listen to what they actually say. The only way you can do it is if you maintain the cartoon you've been handed and you don't allow anything to challenge it, and that's really on you if that's what you choose.
Thank you all. Let's take a 30-minute break. We will be back. All of the people who didn't get to ask a question but who are standing there, just make sure that you push your way to the front of the queue next time, and we'll take more questions. We'll leave more time for questions in the next session. So a big thanks to all of you, and a big thanks to Pangburn Philosophy for making this happen.
Thank you.
See you in a bit.